Since the end of Attack on Titan, it left a lot of people wondering what exactly is the relationship between Eren and Historia. It's one of the most intriguing mysteries within the series, and there aren't that many videos explaining it other than the previous one that I made. However, unfortunately it was copyright striked and deleted. So why not remake this video again, but better, improved, and with more material than before? People think that they have no interaction of any kind, but this couldn't be further away from the truth. Clearly they do, and this video is for those who say otherwise, so link it to them if they disagree. I'm basically only here to deliver the facts and arguments, so let's begin without further ado. When writing fiction, it's important to create captivating and engaging characters who have a purpose to the main plot, helping to drive forward and enforce certain themes to help push the message of the story. There are many different archetypes, all with different roles to play within the story. They can direct the audience's attention, subvert the reader's expectations, provide crucial information, or highlight important aspects of a protagonist's character. Some characters aren't created to be individually captivating. Some shine because of their dynamic with other characters, which is absolutely fine because no character exists within a vacuum. Their dynamic and relationships within their environment defines them. That is a role that Historia Reiss plays as a supporting character within Attack on Titan, a parallel character to Eren Yeager's character. Also known as mirror characters, they are characters who share many similarities with each other. For example, both saw their mothers die in person, have an older half-sibling who opposes their core belief, their mothers are their father's second love, they're similar to Grisha and Dina's relationship, have a dedicated follower who protects them, and are both bound by fate. So why are parallels an important writing trope? Well, parallels show us that Eren and Historia have similar pasts and struggles. Essentially, Historia is a supporting character who reinforces and complements Eren's own struggles, and even individually overcomes them, making the protagonists understand their own flaws so they can hopefully develop. Think about it, you're far more likely to understand a person who's shared the same struggles as you, since you see yourself in them. So Historia is established very early into the story as the character Krista, a selfless angel-like figure who other characters admire, purely based on her appearance and kind-hearted nature. According to the author Isayama, Krista was meant to be this lovable Mo character who only existed for commercial value. He continued to say that this played perfectly into her character because this perfect ideal was nothing but a facade, her personality having nothing but a fake plastic Barbie-like quality. She'd go on to meet Ymir in the Survey Corps, and later in season 2 would expose her false selflessness by seeing through her facade and revealing her true identity, Historia Reiss. Ymir always knew it was a facade because she had lied about who she was her entire life just to survive. She'd impersonated Ymir Fritz, the founder, and also hidden the fact that she was the Jaw Titan from her friends in the Survey Corps. She'd leave Historia with the important words, "Live a life you can be proud of." Historia in actuality was a selfish person who had acted like a Mo character because she wanted to be loved. She wanted people to care about her. But it was more than just that. She was born from an affair between Rod Reiss, the rightful king, and his servant. Nobody cared for her when growing up. Her mother rejected her and both parents wanted her dead. So for the longest time, Historia believed that she never should have been born, being raised on a farm by equally neglectful grandparents who hated her for what they had done to her daughter. Her only friends were the animals on the farm. The other kids would even throw stones at her. After watching her mother being killed by her father, she was given a new identity and shipped over to the Survey Corps, since what was the chance of a tiny little girl like her surviving in the Survey Corps? Being forced into the role of the lovable Krista Lenz to escape her struggles, to become someone new, to become somebody loved. Kind of like how some people make alts on Twitter, or as it's known now, X. She was the antithesis of Eren, who grew up loved by both parents, inheriting the philosophy that being born into the world makes you special inherently. In season 3, Eren would sit down with the real Historia and she would reveal that she was actually the opposite of Krista, being an empty and evil individual. Somebody who sacrificed her friends in a heartbeat if it meant saving her own life. Telling Eren that he could never hope to understand her feelings. Eren admitted that he always got this fake, unnatural feeling from Krista and preferred the real Historia because at least she could accept her natural self. Which is very in character for Eren to say because he seeks freedom and believes everybody is special inherently. So he especially hates when people are bound by roles and facades. Eren tells her that he understands her struggles of being trapped in a role. But why is it that Eren can actually relate to her? And this moves us on to something far more interesting. They've had roles forced upon them their entire lives by people in power. Eren was given the role of hero by humanity within the walls, the role of weapon by the military police, and the role of humanity's savior by his father. Historia was given the role as a lovable Krista, and humanity's savior by her father too. That's why Eren cried when he heard Rod Reiss lie to Historia, so he could use her as nothing but a tool to save humanity within the walls. The author Isayama even acknowledges that both Eren and Historia inherited the sins of a father in the second guidebook of Attack on Titan, and even went as far as saying that everything might actually revolve around this theme. It's only when Eren was kidnapped and chained in the cave when he realized that his father was the one responsible for killing the Reiss family, condemning humanity within the walls to death, and he accepted it as his responsibility now. So Eren realized how many people had died for his sake, which makes him understand perhaps never being born at all would have been a better salvation, and allowing Historia to eat him is the best alternative right now. This allows Historia to remember how depressed she was when her parents neglected her and thought that she would have been better off dead. She then remembers Ymir's words to her. It was both Eren and Ymir who helped her make this bold decision to reject her father's wishes by freeing Eren of his shackles according to the guidebook once again. Eren had been so obsessed with saving everybody and fulfilling his role as humanity's fated hero that he lost sight of how special he was for just being born, falling into the facade of a hero. Historia would slap some sense into him quite literally by telling him that perhaps fate doesn't need a hero, and humanity deserves to be destroyed if people like them have to suffer this much. It's quite a selfish and evil thing to say, but that's the whole point of Historia. Instead of being a hero, Historia rejects fate and exclaims that she's the worst girl who ever lived. She tells Eren the happiest she's ever felt is when he claimed to her that he liked her because she was absurdly honest but a normal girl. She no longer cares what people want or expect from her, and neither should Eren. They should fight for what they want. Eren still didn't believe in himself enough. However, his friends remind him that he's not alone, and Historia even dubs her and Eren the enemies of humanity. Even if a world stands against him, she'll stand by his side, which is literally what would happen in the final arc. But before we get there, in an interview, Isayama was asked, was Historia the reason Eren arose from his abyss? By abyss, I assume it's referring to Eren's depression during this arc. He answers, my entire existence from birth till the day I die has been determined by my father. I think it was amidst this despair that Eren witnessed Historia, who was in a situation close to his own, release herself from a binding yoke known as reiss, and made his mind to face his duty. You could say he finally understood what he himself had to do. Summing up another interview, Isayama talks about how this arc revolved around the portrayal of a father, and whether he'd actually looked into the psychology of this. He suggests an alternative perspective. Rather than being rooted in psychology, the story embeds the idea of killing the father. This theme emerges as a crucial element within the narrative. This perspective underscores the importance of the parent-child relationship and the struggle to break free of predestined roles. Now after this event, Historia would go on to inherit the role as queen as suggested by Levi, but she claims not to be forced into this role because she's choosing it herself, which I do believe is quite interesting since Historia is a Greek word for history, and who else fits the role as queen better than somebody who quite literally embodies the history of Eldia. Her struggles of being rejected and inheriting sins from a past are the same as all Eldians. Her royal blood represents the powers that they all have within them. So as Eren fights for freedom because he believes that all people are born special, Historia fights for her subjects and orphans because she can understand the pain of being hated and rejected. It's that mutual understanding of each other that allows them to grow closer. Now moving on to an intriguing idea, people claim that Eren didn't inherit roles from his father because he's the one who influenced Grisha to steal the founding titan and kill the Reiss family in the first place, and therefore passed the power of the titans to himself. But this isn't 100% true. Grisha was still the one who murdered the Reiss family and gave Eren the role of humanity's savior. He didn't need to listen to what the future Eren had to say, but he did. Deep down it was Grisha's own desire to do this. What I mean by this is, Grisha stopped himself from killing the Reiss family because he was a doctor. He was meant to save lives, he couldn't kill children. He was meant to save, not take. But this role was forced upon him by his father. It's not something he ever wanted to be. His father, Dr. Jaeger, was also a doctor, so this doctor role became Grisha's facade. So all Eren did was remind his father not to fall into this facade and make a choice that is true to himself. Eren believes that all people are free to make their own decisions and he'll never force or manipulate someone into a forced decision. It's the same reason he didn't use the power of a founding titan to manipulate his friends. This means Grisha is mainly responsible for the sins that he passed to his own son. And this is proved by the fact that he regrets his actions. He wished he never listened to Eren. But he's the one who chose to seal his son's fate to save Eldia despite knowing it would lead to the rumbling, showing how selfish he truly is. So in the end it only ever really came down to him. The same with his father, both being left with great regrets. They weren't able to live lives that they could be proud of. But then the question arises, why would Eren want his father to give him the role of savior in the first place if he understands the pain and suffering that it would cause him? This is because Eren no longer sees it as a role or a facade, but rather a power that he can use to help him achieve his goal of liberating his people. Eren thought what Grisha did to the Reiss family was unjustifiable and evil, but Historia explained to him and convinced him otherwise. She did this by telling him it was the only way to save humanity within the walls. It was the only way forward by killing the Reiss family. Which is true, if Grisha had never stolen and passed his power on to Eren, then the events of seasons 1 and 2 never would have happened, since Frida was bound by the curse to renounce war, making her passive. The Paradisians would have been trapped within the walls until the Malians stole the Founding Titan. It's why Eren had Grisha spare Reiss, so the same events would transpire and lead to the rumbling. Historia's words were so important that Eren remembered and repeated them to Zeke, letting him know that their father's choice led them down this path. So at the end of this arc, Eren would kiss Historia's hand and would accidentally see the future memories, including a beautiful scenery. After this event, he's a completely different person because he knows what is to come. He's also realized that touching royal-blooded Eldians allows him to use the Founding Titan's powers. He even withheld this information from everybody to protect Historia. He says he's even willing to sacrifice himself for her to repay his debt to her. Now, Eren and Historia touching doesn't always necessarily result in memories, the coordinate, or the rumbling being activated every time. They've touched several times throughout the series without activating any of the Founding Titan's powers at all. In fact, Eren and Historia would spend a lot of time together practicing holding hands off screen, but were mostly unsuccessful, as John jokingly mentions. Ultimately, the Uprising arc would reinforce the idea that Eren and Historia share the same struggles and desires. Eren understands Historia, and seeing her overcome struggles that he himself couldn't allows him to see one of his own major flaws as a character. Eren believed that he was special because of the powers that he had. He was fine with soldiers being sacrificed at his expense. However, Eren realized that the power of the Titans doesn't belong to him. Eren's problem was that he believed physical power was beyond all other things in the world. But he was wrong. In his own words, Historia made him realize this by changing his perception on what it meant to be strong. He believed that she was a weak one, and he was a strong one, but in reality it was the other way round. He admits that she had become strong. She allowed him to remember his core philosophy that it wasn't power that made people strong or special, it was just being born into the world that did. Speaking about the world, Eren's idealized freedom is beyond just the walls of his island. Eren achieved his goal of reaching the sea, but he was bitterly disappointed when he discovered through his father's memories that what lies beyond the sea is nothing but a world of people who reject his core philosophy of being born free. You see, most people collectively see Eldians as devils who oppressed them in the past and seek their extermination. Eren believes in his own resolve so much that he cannot accept that. If the world steals his people's freedom, he will steal theirs. What a lot of people misinterpret is that Eren is more selfish than he lets on. It's kind of like how when people want everybody to have a fair shot in life, but they're offended when they don't get special treatment. This flaw kind of humanizes Eren because I don't believe he's truly selfless. I don't think anybody is. Humans are kin altruistic, meaning biologically we're more likely to look out for people that we're closer to. So Eren is willing to take the freedom of people he acknowledges are special to protect his own people. If you still don't believe this, during the final season part 1, Zeke meets with the Paradise Island military and suggests a plan to help them. Eren is fine with the 50-year plan that he suggests, which includes a partial rumbling to scare the world from attacking the island, for hopefully a few decades so the island can catch up in technology enough to protect themselves. But when it's revealed that plan requires Historia to receive the Beast Titan and sacrifice herself to her children, Eren was once again not willing to sacrifice her by letting her fall into the role of cattle, making it clear that he won't accept it, which almost makes Historia cry. Eren makes it clear several times that he will not give her up under any circumstances, something Hange will notice several times and pressure Eren on later. In fact, chapters 89 and 107 are almost identical parallels to each other. Both chapters show Eren's unwillingness to sacrifice Historia. Chapter 89 ends with Kruger telling Eren, through Grisha, to have a family. Chapter 107 ends with a family, since Historia is revealed to be pregnant. Eren would go on to destroy humanity as the Historia suggested to him all those years ago if he would continue to cause their suffering. After tricking Zeke, Eren would enter the Path's dimension and force himself out of Zeke's control to touch the founder Ymir, Fritz. He sees her memories and understands her struggles, which does make sense since she's meant to mirror Historia. And Eren obviously having a great understanding of her means he can relate. Ymir and Historia both look identical with blonde hair and blue eyes. I assume they both look identical because Historia is a direct descendant of Ymir, and that's just appearance wise. On contact, Eren sees Ymir's past and sees how she was enslaved while being a child and hunted for sport. She then fell into the crevice of a tree and then came into contact with this mysterious hallucinogenia looking creature which transformed her into the first Titan. The leader of her tribe, King Fritz, then used her to his own ends to expand the Eldian Empire and had 3 daughters with her before she sacrificed herself for him. Her daughters were forced to consume her flesh so their bloodline could retain the power of the Titans. After learning of all this, Eren screams, "It ends now." The next few words mirror the things that Historia said to him, exclaiming that he'll destroy the world.
I'm starting to get sick of humanity! I say let him get wiped out by Titans!
He says that Ymir isn't a slave nor a god.
I can't be selfless, and I don't want to be a god!
She's just a normal girl who can make her own choice.
Now you're just a normal girl.
Lore-wise, Historia's facade Krista is based on a book about Ymir's past, in which she was called Krista, a ladylike girl who made a deal with the devil. In most depictions of a dealing, Ymir offers the devil an apple. Since ancient times, the apple has been a symbol of love, ecstasy, fertility, and knowledge. Even more interestingly, Eren mirrors the Earth Devil, quite obviously. In most depictions, the Earth Devil carries a lamp, meaning it's not just a mindless monster, it has intelligence. Eren is very well known for wearing a cloak, and is also considered the devil of Eldia by Flock and many others. If you look very carefully, this dealing does look very similar to the talk at dawn between Eren and Historia. Back to the book's depiction of this pact. There's these lines next to it that seem unreadable, but if you look carefully you'll notice that the language that Eldians write in is upside down kanji. This line in particular translates to, "Because it's cold every day, don't catch a cold, please be careful." Meaning that there's some sort of affection and care between Krista and the devil. This most likely is a reference to the lines from Isayama's main inspiration, the romance game Muv-Luv. To speak more on this, Eren is based on the Muv-Luv protagonist Takru, whereas Historia is inspired by the character Maya, a wealthy noble who lost her parents and her older sister. Sound familiar? Well, it gets more familiar. Listen to this. The Love Muv series is split into 3 major games, which are essentially 3 timelines of the same event, but they kinda precede the previous one, since the main character is stuck in a time loop. Basically, each timeline is different, and Maya grows closer to Takru each time the timeline is reset. In the first game, which is set in a high school setting, akin to Attack on Titan school casts, Maya doesn't have much of an interest in Takru, but she does consider it. In the second game, she grows closer to him in an apocalyptic setting. Replicating those feelings, Takru can choose to marry and have a child with one of 5 girls, including Maya. So she ends up becoming this powerful political figure who gives a speech at the end of a series to the Japanese people, just like Historia does at the end of a manga. In the third and final game, she desperately falls in love with Takru, however this time he friendzones her. Being unable to live with herself because of this, she forces Takru to put her out of her misery by killing her, over his main love interest Sumika, who, surprise surprise, is Mikasa's main inspiration. However, she also ends up dying, so romantically the ending is kind of bleak. Now there could in a similar way be a romantic tension between Eren and Historia. Now hear me out. The first and most minor instant of Eren potentially having feelings for Historia is very early on in the OVA Distress. Historia, or at the time Krista, technically, is kidnapped by bandits. The cadets are surprised that the most distressed of them all, and most vocal, is clearly Eren, who demands to save her with visible anger on his face. Now you might not make anything of this, since it's possible that he'll do this for anybody, since it's in his character to stand up for all of his friends. However, there is something odd about what happens next. He declares that he will save Krista, and he begins to cry, "Call your name please." But listen carefully to the lyrics as he's saying this during this scene in particular.
Mate!
Now this can't be a coincidence. The song was definitely consciously selected, but you can take that with a grain of salt if you want. I should make it clear that Ymir and Historia do most likely share mutual feelings, since there's only so many times you can joke about getting married. Very consistently they're referred to as friends, but I think we can read in between the lines, to be honest. However, this idea that Historia can only be a lesbian is ridiculous. Yeah, brand new concept here. I came up with this personally and it's never been thought of before. Yeah, hear me out. Bisexuality. Yeah, believe it or not, that exists. I know it's completely crazy, but we do already know that Historia at the end of a manga was happily married with a child, so that should be considered. Now, I'm not saying that she's not into women. It's just that she doesn't inherently just have to be into them. I don't think it's that far-fetched either, considering that Isayama, despite being in a straight marriage, allegedly, is definitely questionable at times. The Ymir and Historia relationship could have been developed further. Unfortunately, Ymir obviously had her life cut a little short, so of course Historia is allowed to move on if you do think they were a couple or whatever. It's never confirmed, but like I said, we can read in between the lines. Anyway, after activating the rumbling, the walls come crashing down outside. Eren makes a speech communicating to all Eldians by way of a founding titan within the Path's dimension. He then rejects the idea that the people that he cares about will be killed for their father's sins. He won't let the fate of his people be left to chance, remembering the choices that led him to that point. In a flashback, Eren travelled back to Paradise Island to warn Historia of a military police's plan to go ahead with a 50-year plan and sacrifice her. He tells her that their only options are to either run or fight. But Historia tells him that she won't run and accepts her fate, but thanks Eren for standing up for her back when the plan was first proposed, showing how much it really meant to her. Eren says it might be fine for her, but it's not fine for him, and refuses to sacrifice her, just as she refused to sacrifice him all of those years ago. He confined his plan to begin the rumbling to her first because he thought the flock and her would understand. But Historia objects on the basis that not everybody outside the walls is their enemy. A lot of innocents, like his mother, would die, meaning that he told Historia about his mother's death at some point prior to their meeting at dawn. Eren said that he understood this, but the only way to end the cycle of hate is to bury the history that is related to it. Eren offers to use the Founding Titan's powers to wipe her mind if enduring them would hurt her too much. When she refuses, Eren reminds her that she's fallen back into the facade of a selfless and fake Krista. He snaps her out of it by re-quoting her as his savior, the self-proclaimed worst girl in the world, the selfish Historia who is an enemy of humanity, and could watch the world burn if it required them to suffer. The kanji used were Q, which means lifesaver, and is meant to be different to when Falco saved Eren. The kanji used for that was Suke, which means to help or aid. This action of Eren reminding her of who she truly is the parallel of when he reminded his father Grisha of who he truly was, an Eldian restorationist. Eren remembers his conversation with Zeke in Mali. The topic was about Mikasa's headaches. Eren suspects that Ackermen suffer from his engineered behavior that forces them to serve and protect whoever they consider their master or host. Zeke has never heard of such nonsense before. He rather thinks that Mikasa's affection and desire to protect him is simply due to the fact that she loves him. Eren then instantly thinks back to Historia saying, well then. This undeniably proves that Eren at least thought of Historia in the same romantic light, regardless of how the manga would end. I think that at least has to be admitted, otherwise this sequence of memories just wouldn't make sense at all. Also consider Eren's romantic options being parallel to Takru from Love, and only then it begins to all make sense. Both conversations are purposely obscured. Eren tries to act as if he's oblivious to the context because there's no point in having a relationship since he wouldn't live past 4 years due to the curse of Ymir. Historia asked Eren what he'd think about her having a child. Eren recalls the damage that he did to his own body, cutting off his own foot with a blunt blade and forcing a bullet through his eye. He wants him and his friends to live long, happy lives. Now there's this misconception. People believe that Eren manipulated or forced Historia into having a child, so enough time could be delayed for him to execute his plan. Of course throughout the series, Eren has influenced his friends, so his plan can run more smoothly, like when he lied about hating Mikasa. But this was never truly malicious. He never forced them to actually act unnaturally. It's the same reason he never straight up used the Founding Titan's power to mind control or wipe his friends' minds when they are trying to actively stop the rumbling. This is because Eren is directly opposed to manipulation and facades. He hates roles being forced upon people. By definition, manipulation is, I quote, the devious use or means to exploit, control or otherwise influence others to one's advantage. At no point did Eren lie, deceive, or trick Historia to do anything devious in any way, shape, or form. Unironically, Eren, back in the Uprising arc, told her that he's always hated her unnatural facade, so it would make no sense for him to trick her into a role of a mother or a tool for his own needs. It would literally contradict everything that he stands for. The funny thing is, Eren genuinely didn't approach her to delay the 50-year plan or his own plan. He genuinely wanted to protect her from becoming, in his own words, breeding cattle. If he forced her to have children for his own ends, then she'd be nothing but breeding cattle, which would contradict the dozens of times he's made it clear that he hates forcing her into that role in particular, because he believes everybody is born free. It's the same reason he allows his friends to choose if they want to stand with or against him. It's not his choice to make. So there's no way that he'd want anyone to have a child if it wasn't from their own free will. Now we all know what happens next. Historia becomes pregnant, but the military police higher-ups question why she did this. It's a little too convenient. Now, as you would expect, they are super misogynistic, calling her lowborn for a premarital pregnancy. They move on to the idea that she was trying to delay the 50-year plan, which like I mentioned a second ago doesn't really make sense since we know the full context. They don't, so I don't blame them. The military police was told that the father was the farmer, despite being portrayed as nothing but a front. The farmer was supposedly Historia's childhood bully who threw stones at her and wanted redemption. But there were clues that never paid off, like why did Eren stay hooded to warn Historia of the military police's plans? And more importantly, why did Historia lie to Levi about her pregnancy date? In the end, I think it makes more sense for Eren to have been the father. It would have resolved the sins of a father narrative, which applies to them two directly, so they could surpass their fathers. So Eren not forcing his own child to be anything because they're born special would have actually ended his family's curse and concluded this narrative. There was a massive narrative relevance on children within the story. They had to get children out of the forest according to Mr. Blouse. Children were the future according to Onyankopon. The rumbling was a destruction that would contrast to the rebirth of new life. Sins would be passed on to future generations. So it's very disappointing to see that the sins of a father narrative not link into the child narrative. From what I remember, it was almost this 2-year wait in real time for us to learn who the father of Historia's child was. That's a ridiculous amount of time. Obviously her pregnancy plot point was very relevant at the time. It covered all the way through the rumbling, and she went into labour during the last few chapters. I remember everybody was talking about who the father was. Was it Eren? Was it Flock? Who was it? It was a very important mystery at the time, and its conclusion felt very underwhelming. The farmer being the father made it feel as if Historia had been sidelined for no other reason other than to misdirect and subvert the reader, which admittedly isn't the greatest writing. Considering the principle of Chekhov's gun, Isayama shouldn't have prolonged an important narrative to essentially just troll or trick the reader. Although I guess Isayama did say that he wanted to betray the reader. If that genuinely is the case, I feel then the whole pregnancy plot point could have been wrapped up much earlier. But in the end, it was left way too ambiguous if Eren genuinely loved Historia. It was definitely hinted, but it was ambiguous since it was revealed in the final chapter that Eren wanted to be with Mikasa. It all felt very reminiscent of Maya's treatment in Love Love. Maybe that's what Isayama had in mind. It's possible that Historia's child still could have been Eren's, but I was disappointed to learn that according to the guidebook, the farmer is indeed the father. I genuinely wonder what Isayama meant by the leaked panel of a man holding his child saying "you are free" in the final panel. He claimed it was a man surpassing their father. It can't have been Grisha since he failed to surpass his father, so hopefully Isayama can elaborate on this later. So 3 years later, 80% of the world's population was crushed by the rumbling. Historia is happily married to the farmer and celebrates their daughter's birthday. As Queen of Paradise Island, she would greatly increase the military power of the island as it took a more nationalist approach. Historia wrote in a letter to her friends that Eren told her that the world was right about Eldians being truly evil. She repeated, "If we win, we live. If we lose, we die. If we don't fight, we can't win. Fight, fight. This fight will not end until one side is completely destroyed." These cruel words from Eren, according to Historia, have some truth to them. This was ultimately the world that Eren left for them, a world without titans. In the end, Eren transgressed as a character, but he did keep his promise to Historia and allowed her to live happily and freely with her child. Although the island was destroyed, this promise was kept. Anyway, that wraps up everything. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. And I'll see you next time. Peace out.